WFFA.win for her website. And in the description of the Rumble channel that we have, Michelle Moore's Show Rumble channel, you're going to see all the different links. She has a ton of ways to be able to contribute to her cause as well. But Christie, welcome.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about some pretty heavy subjects today.
Yes. And I think my audience is used to that, at least in the last few days. It's gotten really heavy. Hey, Christie, so when I was doing a little bit of research, I saw something that just really grabbed me. It said, no, of course, I got to hear all about you from Warren, but then doing the research on you, this one paragraph grabbed my attention. It says, Christie is no stranger to the strategies of the cartel and corruption. Christie is exposing the politicians that are keeping our border open and selling children. That's a big statement, girl. Wow.
I wish that statement wasn't accurate, but it's very spot on and very accurate. We have open borders. If you're living in America, you understand that if you don't know that our borders are open, that we don't have operational control of our borders, you've been living under a rock. We have policies and agenda, and I want to be very clear about something. I don't bring my personal politics into any of this stuff because this isn't a political issue. This, first and foremost, the open borders are a national and security issue. Secondly, it is a humanitarian crisis and issue.
Yes.
Amen.
That's good.
And what borders are you talking about? Just what borders are you talking about? Are you talking about just what borders exactly are you on? I hear your stories. And it's like listening to what I would see in a movie go on. When I talk to you at the Clay Clark events, I'm there with Charlie usually, but I usually get over there and get to hug your neck and say, hey, Christie, how you doing? And then you start telling me these wonderful stories. I'm like, I'm drawn to it. And I thank you for what you're doing, because I think you are on the front lines. I also know that there's certain things that you can say, certain things that you can't say. I know the group of people that you run around with and probably don't know hardly any of them. I want to say that before to let you know that we understand if there's certain things you can say and you can't. But when you talk about the borders, where exactly are you talking about?
So we have 4 borders on the United States of America. It's not just the southern border. We have a northern border, we have a Pacific border, and we have a West Coast. We have a West Coast and the East Coast border. And people forget about that. Strategically, the cartels, and let me unpack something really quick, because I think most listeners, I try to dumb stuff down a little bit because everybody runs in the circle that I run in and understand the lingo that our group of professionals with our expertise deal with, right? So first and foremost, cartels. That's plural because there's numerous organizations, whether you're the Zetas, the Sinaloas. We could go on and name all of these different cartels. These are business organizations. So imagine a corporation or a business like Microsoft. That's what these cartel organizations are. They operate at a high level. Most of the higher ups who are running these organizations, for the most part, they've gone to college. Like we're talking Wharton, we're talking Harvard, so they understand how to not just run a criminal organization, but how to run legitimate organizations. And there's a lot of layers to this, right? You have a lot of front organizations and things like that, and how they money launder not their money from all of their different nefarious activities, whether it's weapons trafficking, organ trafficking, infant trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking, now one of the new things I believe that they're getting into is smuggling in very highly sensitive bioweapons and things like that.
And that's a constant.
Wow.
And we're trying to take that out in Ukraine right now. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. So, Christie, I know that you actually, yes, you're very knowledgeable about the border. And part of that knowledge comes from being boots on the ground down there. In fact, one of the slogan I saw that you have is in the fight on the front lines. I'd say you don't get more front lines than that. So, yeah. Christie, tell us, what have you seen firsthand when you get down there?
Well, my journey at the border started 2 weeks into the Biden administration. So I want to be very clear about how much time I've actually had. I'm probably the only person who has literally spent the amount of time I have at the border. And those who have been following me literally since the beginning, Fox News and all of these other reporters are finally getting caught up with what literally I've been discussing and warning America about and briefed governors' offices about over 2 years ago. From the northern border, the Chinese and the Russians coming in, to the southern border, to the eastern coast where we have container ships, Pacific coast, you name it. And so I've driven the full 2,000 miles of the southern border, probably the only one who has done that as well. I've been to 30 states. So when I tell you I've been on the front lines, I've been on the front lines. And I can't do this without my team. I have an incredible team behind me. They have very special skill sets that I will not talk about here. And we ride along with Border Patrol, ICE, DHS, I've been U.S. Marshals, sheriffs, so much so that Fox News over a year ago saw us out in the field doing an operation with a proof of concept that we did with in Kenny County with Sheriff Brad Coe. And they did a small snippet of what our team's capabilities are, because we have very sophisticated equipment that even our own law enforcement and Border Patrol and federal agents don't have. And I know that's kind of shocking out there, but we have so much red tape that by the time they're approved for a certain amount of equipment or whatever that is, it's typically outdated. And also this administration purposefully is cutting budgets and taking away their abilities to have the type of tools that they need to counter these transnational criminal organizations. So we've been in it. Some of the stuff that we've seen at the border, Michelle, that you asked me, when I first started the border, I wasn't looking at the humanitarian side of this. I was looking at it from a national and domestic security perspective and just kind of gathering information and intel to see how the policies were affecting and impacting America and how dangerous this was going to be. And during that journey, you start seeing the humanitarian aspect and the horrific things that the cartel are doing that another human being can do to another human being. I've been on what we call the Mexican highway. A Mexican highway is a highway that's very rough terrain, very difficult areas to get in, but they bring up women, children, individuals that are marked for the labor trade, sex trade industry, or even organ trade industry. And there's staging grounds throughout the border, whether it's from California to Texas. And it's very difficult to get up into these staging ground areas. And unfortunately, women and children are literally tied down to trees with shackles and ropes, and they're repetitively raped. And I mean, anywhere from 22 men's different semens, these coyotes, these mules, these are animals, and they're raped into submission. And that's done usually over the course of a 24, sometimes 48-hour period before the pickups come and pick them up. And then they're dispersed to the buyers throughout the United States of America. Children are earmarked in some of these caravans. And by the way, not just coming up from 174 plus different nations, but we have children who are kidnapped and disappear on our soil who are going the other way. And some of these children are taken to what I consider slaughterhouses. These are warehouses that are set up along the border very systematically. And in those warehouses, they are slaughtered, murdered for their hearts, their livers, all sorts of stuff. And then they're sold on the black market. I've seen the decapitated babies' heads floating down the Rio Grande. I've been in stash houses where I've seen the sacrifices. This is real stuff. And if you would have asked me 2.5 years ago, did I think this was existing? Yeah, maybe, but you hear about it. But when I've lived it and seen it personally firsthand, have videos, have pictures of this, you can't turn away.
Yeah, I understand. That's
Amazing.
Yeah, you can't when you see things like that or know about things like that. I'm not surprised to hear that you have the funding or the ability to be able to do things that local law enforcement can't do. After listening yesterday on our show and having Yako, he explained some things that was just like, holy cow. They didn't even, he described a sheriff who didn't even have a printer and paper. They didn't even have a printer. And so
Mhm.
because of the funding that they're lacking, and so it was just absolutely shocking and jaw-dropping to hear the lack of support, structure, and supplies that they need down there, whether that's the sheriff, the local law enforcement, the border patrol, it's all of them. And so how are you getting your funding? How are you able to make these things happen and get this stuff going?
Fund it myself. It's really hard to get people to fund anything.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm glad you brought that up. And then again, I work with some incredible people who have written off countless hundreds of thousands of dollars. One mission, 7-day mission, cost me anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 if we're doing a very serious mission. Depends on what we're doing and what we have to do. Literally, I'm going broke funding this to save my country because, I get really disheartened out there, and I love the film because our morals are displaced. Our what we put our time, talents, and treasures in are completely displaced. I was watching Tucker Carlson about a month and a half ago, and they had a woman who just decided to show up and, get her 5 minutes of fame, but she saw stray dogs who are being left by all of these illegals. And I love animals. I'm a huge animal lover. And they literally raised over $2 million in a 3-day period of time to feed and house stray dogs. And I'm telling your listeners right now, I can't raise $100 to save a child's life.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Do we have her links and things up there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We're taking care of all of that as far as how to donate and everything. It's going to be in the description. And so it's all going to be there for everybody. As soon as the show is over, we were working on that before. And so we'll see to it. That's the first thing that's going to be finished up. We were already working on it. But Christie, and actually I did a show this morning. And so we're expecting some donations, and I'm just going to pledge whatever is raised to support you. So we'll send that money along as well. But it is one of those things, Christie, where you get down there and it sounds like it's absolutely horrifying and beyond belief. And so what do you think it's going to take to shake people awake to understand and realize what is going on and the level of just atrocities that are happening?
That's a great question. I did an event in McAllen, Texas over a year ago. And General Flynn was there and Ted Nugent. And I had the who's who of everybody who was there. And even the OWN movement, the GOP, the mayors, they tried to stop this event at all costs. It was a completely sabotaged event, but it was a success. And the reason why I say it was a success is number one, I'm a Christian. And, I really prayed about it. I lost $178,000 just on that event alone because they shut this down. But I prayed and God said for me to stay the course. There was a butterfly museum on the border there. They actually had gotten into a lawsuit with Trump's administration because they didn't want the wall to go through their backyard. The reason why is this butterfly museum is a cover for a front organization, and there's human trafficking and other nefarious activity that take place. They were so scared of me and my organization. You can look this up. It's well known. Even Bill Mayer, whatever his, he even mentioned us. But we stayed the course, and because they now went on my radar, our organization was pivotal in closing that facility down permanently because they were scared that we were going to peel back the onions and start looking at who is funding them. And I can tell you, I'm going to just say it right here. One of the individuals who are on the board of directors for this are connected to the Bush family. So we have serious problems with human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking within our own federal agencies and our own politicians who are helping to aid and abet this. And I'm going to give you an example. So if you go all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s, the CIA, and this is knowledge, you can actually search everything I'm telling you. The CIA was very instrumental in helping to boost and make more powerful the cartels. El Chapo was one of them, and giving them weapons and drugs to booster them so they can destabilize countries so they can keep control over them. This is a practice that's been going on for a very long time. If you saw the movie American Made with Tom Cruise, this is facts, this is truth, and this is how our CIA operates. They are continuing to do that today. So much so that 2 weeks before 2 weeks before Christmas, I was doing an operation with me and my team. And I was riding around with police chief Rich Jessup of San Luis County in Arizona. And we came upon a lot of activity. And so we pulled up and we got out and I started filming. And tunnels exist, by the way. They're out there. They're everywhere. They're all over the borders of the United States, everywhere. And by the way, not just in the United States, but they're all over the world. And they're used for a whole lot of different bad stuff.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting is this particular tunnel that was just recently discovered not too long ago is the most sophisticated tunnel supposedly discovered ever on our soil. This tunnel was 4 football fields long. And I want you to think about that. It started in Mexico in a warehouse. It came underneath a very highly trafficked Border Patrol area where electronic gate comes up and down. Border Patrol is always there. We have sensors. We have a lot of camera systems and things like that in this particular sector. It went underneath a residential community, took a left-hand turn and came up in a home. This tunnel is 25 feet underneath the ground. Fortified walls, fortified ceilings. It has a rail system, fiber optics, fiber optics, electricity, ventilation systems, and I could go on. To get something that has fiber optics, you have to have a telecommunication company, either Bell or somebody in either Mexico or in the United States, both, especially because it runs into the United States as well, to activate that, right? Also, there was the 3-letter agency, a special division within Homeland Security, and 2 scientists from Washington, D.C. there. They didn't want us to film. We respected that. But they're still there at that tunnel. I was just there 3 weeks ago. And when I started asking some deputies about this, who, by the way, were under Chief Jessup's division, they all acted like they had no idea that this tunnel existed, that it was there. They've never heard of it. So there's a massive cover-up going on. And my question is, the first thing that you would think of is human trafficking and drug trafficking with this particular tunnel. Could be. But more importantly, America, we deserve answers. I believe this tunnel could be used to bring in and out bioweapons, small nuclear devices, dirty bombs, etc. So this keeps me up at night.
Wow. That's why we all need to be prepared. That's we're going to talk about your storm series here in a little bit. So that's some pretty cool stuff.
So Christie, I want to go back to something that you were saying about, and this is just horrific, but the women that are chained up and tied to trees and all of that. Who's buying these women, and what are they buying them for? Are they buying them to sell them for the trafficking, or is there something else that I'm just not aware of?
So the United States of America is the #1 buyer for human and child trafficking, the #1 purchaser in the United States of America. That is a horrific statistic. Wow. And they're buying people from in the United States and outside of the United States. For an example, our team, can't get into how we do this, but we get a hold of coyotes' phones and we download that information, and we literally have numbers that come up all over the United States of America. And when we in our cyber team looks at delving into this data, sometimes we're able to ping locations and who they are and name names. And so we're compiling a whole list of stuff of 2 years worth of work. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to do. And again, donations go to this type of work so we can really expose both politicians, businessmen, etc., and the cartels. And you know, when you have buyers who take these children and women, it's for a multitude of things. It's for the sex trade, the labor trade. You've got those individuals, believe it or not, there's really disgusting demonic people out there who do sacrifices, human sacrifices. This is real. Adrenochrome, I could go into, there's a lot of reasons why they do that. And we have to stop this from happening. And I know our organization, Women Fighting for America, we have a solution to eradicate the trafficking. But again, it takes all of us partnering together to do this.
I just have a hard time. You think, okay, number one, what is number one? It's like, are there that many sickos in the world? It's just a lot to take in. Yesterday when we had Yaku on, he said, I asked, we had someone write in and they asked about how many of the people that the children, there's about 1% we actually find out about, he said. And so there's 99% that, others that we never know about, that never get rescued, that are either murdered, killed, whatever, never found. And so he said, but of those 1%, the question that we had gotten was how many of the ones that you know of tend to be either satanic ritual abuse related or adrenochrome. And he said 1 in 3.
Yeah, it's accurate. That's
Wow.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
he said
I've been into, so we have a film where I went actually live, because a lot of times if I can, I will go live during my operation so people can act. So if you're following me and I'm out in the field, you get to see firsthand a lot of stuff that we see while it's happening. And in these stash houses, you'll see remnants of sacrifices, not just human, by the way, but animals. They believe that if they eat the organ of the animal, that they actually get that power. This is real. I mean, you can ask Sheriff Mark Lamb, Sheriff Daniels, the Sabre teams, a lot of the deputies who are on the ground, Border Patrol, they will all collaborate 100% of what I'm saying. And so in these stash houses, you'll see where they've sacrificed these animals and they've gut them open they cut them like straight up and they pull their organs out. They eat the organs. There's graphic images on the walls, sexual graphic images, satanic symbols. This is a reality, folks, that we're living in. There is good in this world and there is pure evil in this world. And I've seen it firsthand.
Now, Christie, I know there are a lot of things that you can't necessarily speak about, but you just have to let us know if I ask you about something that you can't. But I wanted to ask you, Warren was sharing with me about a special piece of equipment that you had that you and your team used when you're down at the border. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of goes further than like seismic. So, and again, that's why with the tunnel, I believe our own government, federal government, is help build that tunnel. They know that tunnel's there and they're covering something up because there's vibrations that happen. And so we actually have the capability that some of our systems can, when we scan over an area, we can see over 200 feet underneath the ground. And we're able to tell if something is actually a fork even. We use a lot of different technology, sensor systems, and we can tell even on a vibration, if we put some of our systems down in place, we can tell what kind of vehicle it is, what kind of tire tracks that is, whether it's a coyote, whether it's a human, if they have weight on their backs. I mean, we have some pretty sophisticated product that we use. And it's really a shame that we can even track. I was asked a year ago, March, to go to Governor Ducey's office and brief. We had 27 sheriffs. We had the AG, we had Ducey's office. We had all of these senators. We had representatives in this, and we were literally showing them what we've done and what our capabilities are. And even Tom Homan, who was the former ICE director under President Trump, not paying him. He doesn't work for my organization, nothing like that. He thought that it was so important that they understood that he saw what we did firsthand, that they needed to implement this. And he came in through that meeting and said, you need to do this and fund this. Do you think that they did? No. That tells you they don't have the will to do so. And it can be done through a private public partnership. It's that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not creating new legislation or laws. It can be done. But we have to have those in power who have the purse strings to say, we want this, we want to contract with this organization to make sure this happens. We can even track movements of the cartel, whether it's humans, drugs, you name it, weapons, whatever. Once we lock on, we can track them 200, 300, 400 miles inland and find where they're going. We can see 10 miles into Mexico on this side of the border. I mean, I'm not going to get into all of our technologies, but there's a lot of things that we can do. When my team rolls in, we did 9 proof of concepts with different sheriffs and Border Patrol. Every single time me and my team rolled in with them under the direction of law enforcement, we had 100% detection and apprehension rate.
Wow.
That includes the gotaways.
Wow.
Well, girl, I just want to say I'm glad we're on the same team. I wouldn't want to be fighting against you. I just want to give everybody an update. So producer Ron says all the links for Women Fighting for America are in the description of today's show, and all the links are active. Rumble can get weird and wonky, so this is in a way that the links are there and you just click on it and takes you right where you need to go to get Christie, whatever you want to get her. So you can just click on the link. Christie, okay, I'm intrigued. So we're talking about the southern border a lot, and of course yesterday's show was a lot about the southern border, but I am interested to also know, what do you know as far as, I've heard a lot about Canada, and we're not really hearing and speaking about Canada very much, but I had heard that there were Chinese troops up there that were actually being trained. And I've seen footage of this, but it was a couple of years ago. And we're not really hearing a lot of truthers or different people talking about it. Do you have anything that you would be able to add as far as insight and intel and experience on that?
100%. So we started looking at the northern border about a year and a half ago. And so there's a couple little small towns, one particular small town in upstate New York, that the Biden administration bought huge swatches of land in this little sector. And this is like a small town in the middle of nowhere. They've also, the port of entry where Canada and this small little town connect, they started construction probably about over 6 to 8 months ago to widen this highway, like massively, like 5-6 lanes. And so when I see activity like that, it kind of piques me, you know, from a strategy perspective. I'm like, why would you need 5 to 6 lanes coming in and out of a port of entry into in and out of Canada in the middle of nowhere where there's not a lot of trade activity going on, right? And so there's a psychiatric ward that is huge. It's where all of the dangerous criminals go who are deemed to have psychiatric issues and things like that. So I started looking at that as well because it connects to the border, to the border there. And then I started talking to a couple of the law enforcement on the ground there, and they're seeing a lot of activity in this particular area. There's also a lake, and we have film footage from some fishermen who are fishing. And they have Chinese nationals and they have Russian military guys on boats coming through the lake from Canada into the United States of America. So this has been going on for a very long time. China has been training with Canadian forces for a very long time. Russia now is up there. And if your listeners remember way back when the truckers were protesting and Trudeau had them arrested, they were not arrested by Canadian police. They were arrested by United Nations forces, NATO forces. And why is that key? So I'm going to kind of connect the dots back to the southern border here for a second, because I think your listeners need to understand. In Iran, and I want everybody to think in the news right now, what is Russia doing? Xi Jinping and Putin have been meeting. They're forming an alliance. China is in alliance with Iran as well. And now Putin and Russia are forming that alliance with Iran as well. Why does this matter? So when I discovered the tunnel and I started looking at how sophisticated this tunnel was, and by the way, we actually discovered 2 more tunnels that I'm not going to get into right now, but I started saying, what did Biden do in the last 6 months? Well, in October of last year, Biden did what? He went to a communist dictator country who is funded mostly by Iran, and that is Venezuela, to get our oil and gas, okay? And so then I was like, okay, let me look at now what's going on and I'm going to pull the records for cargo container ships that are coming in and out of Central and South America. Then I'm going to look at the airspace. Who and what aircrafts have been flying in and out of Central and South America? And what I discovered, and there was like a small little blurb in the news. I don't know, most people don't even know if you don't know where to look. But in June of last year, that last summer, a aircraft took off from Tehran, Iran. This aircraft is Air Fars Kashim. This is a U.S. sanctioned airline. The pilot of that plane was a board member of that very airline, but he was also one of the heads of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. And if you don't know who the Revolutionary Guard is, they're kind of like the elite force, like our elite force. These are very brutal individuals. They're terrorists. So this plane took off and it went to Cuba. It landed in Mexico City. And then it went to Caracas, Venezuela. And then it ended in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The only reason why we know what's on that plane and who was on that plane is because of a brave opposition politician who used to be in intelligence in Brazil. The equipment that was on that plane was highly sophisticated cyber intelligence equipment. And then they had 14 individuals that they picked up from Venezuela who are cyber intelligence operatives. What they were doing in Mexico, I started digging deeper. Why were they in Mexico City and who were they meeting with? They were meeting with some of the heads of the cartel. They have training camps right now with the cartels in Central, South America, and Mexico with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard training forces on our southern borders. Why do you think that is? Now you have open borders. You have 81% of every single person who's coming across the borders, northern and southern borders, 81%. These are not my numbers. These are our own Border Patrol and government's numbers. Single adult males of fighting age. I have photographs and video, militias, military grade Russians, Ukrainians, Chinese, all coming and flooding in our borders. They're not coming here to be accountants. I promise you that.
This is why you were talking earlier about Iran and the borders and what it has to do with us and all that stuff. So, wow, it's a pretty big
and Warren, if you look the other day, we've had 364 terrorists on our known watch list caught. How many have gotten through the gotaways? 40,000 gotaways in one small sector in Texas alone in 1 month. How many do we know? We've looked at the numbers. We're probably upwards of over 3,000 plus terrorists who are waiting for the order, death to America, because of this administration's incompetency, purposeful incompetency.
Well, that means, when you see things like Iran and Saudi Arabia getting together, it's all kind of a trip. It's a lot of stuff going on.
Everything I'm telling your listeners, you can find this, you can research it. You just have to do some digging and know how to research and figure out and connect the dots of what's really happening. And, I just got back I was invited to go and speak at the United Nations, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. I was like, why am I being invited to speak at the United Nations? Because I am not a fan of the United Nations at all. Right. And my team and my security team kind of briefed me and they said, we kind of went back and forth about whether or not I should go for numerous reasons. And at the end of the day, I prayed and God said, Christie, I want you to go. So literally last minute, I accepted the invite to go and speak at the United Nations. And I'll pause here for a minute, but we're going to get into that as well, because I think America needs to understand what is at play and what the plans are.
Yeah. So Christie, I want to get into the UN stuff, but real quick, I want to first go back to something. I want to finish up with this. So, I was asking you about the Canadian, Chinese stuff north of the border. We started out talking about the South, but also you mentioned early on in the show already, you had mentioned something about I thought you said something about shipping containers at the East. And I'm sure the West as well of our country. And so I've done my own research on those shipping containers and things, especially that come in through the West. I haven't heard a ton about the East side, but could you please give us an update on some of that and give the, I just don't think it's common knowledge. I just happen to know some of that stuff and have studied and researched some of that, but could you speak on that as far as what is going on?
So shipping containers are utilized for a lot of different reasons. Human traffickers use shipping containers all the time. There's a lot of things that come in on especially off the West Coast, by the way, because you have a governor who is a communist socialist, Nancy Pelosi's grand nephew. And so you have, it's kind of like the perfect melting storm that you can come in and flood a whole bunch of stuff in undetected. And so we know that they are trafficking humans. So typically what would happen, and I assume you're asking me about the human trafficking side of what they're using containers for, correct?
Well, that and what else? What else are they doing with these shipping containers?
Yeah. So children are typically put, and by the way, this happens in Greece and a lot of other different countries. So they're lured away either from their families or they're kidnapped. And a lot of times they will stuff as many as you can into these shipping containers. And unfortunately, you know, at the other end of their location, wherever they're going, they don't care that sometimes up to 50–60% of them pass away and die because there's no air, unsanitary conditions, and things like that. So this happens all the time with those shipping containers as well. But also shipping containers are utilized to bring in weapons and dirty bombs and other things. Here, I'll kind of go back to a scenario. Again, this was in the news, and you have to know where to look because it was really pushed down and hushed. But in California, Newport Beach, California, about a year ago, there was supposedly training exercise. And the training exercise was they found a small dirty nuclear device in Newport Beach. And they were able to get it and detonate it, take care of it. But it was under the disguise of a training exercise. That was not a training exercise. That was reality. They actually found that device. This was real. And, you know, this happens all the time. And we have a lot of good guys out there working very, very hard to thwart this type of activity from coming onto our soil. But unfortunately, there's not enough of them. And there's more and more of the enemy. So I believe that America, unfortunately, will see something very tragic very soon.
You had
Okay,
told
Christie.
me you had a few other things like that before, and I never mentioned it, so I kept my mouth shut. I was a good boy.
Okay.
Well, I think America needs to know. I think we need to take the gloves off.
Yeah.
I think we need to tell people the truth so they can prepare for the storm that's here. It's here. It's really, it's not that it's coming, it's actually here. And we have to be prepared for this stuff. It's human trafficking. I'm gonna tell you about a story right now that's going on currently in Hawaii. And if we can raise money, I was literally asked the other day, Christie, can you and your team please come to Hawaii and stop this from happening? And I had to say no, because I just don't have the funding to do it, or I would send my team in, because it's just tragic. We have off the coast of Hawaii right now, we have international vessels, very expensive yachts from foreign nations who are sitting and anchoring off in international water in Hawaii. And they are buying women and children, and they're being shipped from Hawaii by boat onto these yachts every single day right now. And we can stop this. And also, what else are they shipping?
Right.
And law enforcement, unfortunately, Coast Guard, all of these agencies, they're overworked, overwhelmed, because it's purposeful to keep them so overwhelmed and distracted that they cannot investigate all this stuff. And two, a lot of times they're told to stand down and they're not allowed, and their hands are tied. Cuba right now, here's an example. Do you know that 100 state troopers, Governor DeSantis called 100 state troopers right now off the streets of Florida, off the highways, and 100 state troopers are down in Key West right now because there's that many Cubans coming over, and God knows who else is coming over, trying to infiltrate our water system in Florida to get here. This is going
Christie,
on.
I saw a video just a couple of days ago of Americans on the beach, and they are literally hanging out in their swimsuits, and somebody got out the phone and started recording people getting out of the boat and walking onto the beaches and coming up onto the land.
Yeah, when they're met with my team, I can promise you that's as far as they're going to get.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So we're getting a lot of questions, but I want to go on ahead. I want to make sure that we get to the UN stuff. I'd love to hear what you spoke about. Why do you think you were invited?
I'm still trying to digest why I was invited, but I think just like me, you keep your enemies pretty close to you. So you know what they're doing, right? And I believe that that's why God wanted me to go to the United Nations, because he wanted me to hear more than me speaking. He wanted me to hear what was being said. And language matters, and in anything and everything, you have to understand when anybody's talking, whether it's a politician, president, whatever, Microsoft, Bill Gates, you have to hone in on what they're saying, right? Not what they're doing, but what they're saying. And
right.
so I want to talk to you guys, and I made a ton of notes, and we probably won't have time to get into all of this today, but if I make no mistake, the storm series, I'm going to get into this and connect the dots. So at the United Nations, there was, every year, the United States intelligence community, there's a United States Intelligence Committee, and they give an annual report. It's an assessment. It's a report that's given every year. And it's about what is the number one lethal threat. And I want you guys to listen to that word, lethal threat assessment. So what was the threat assessment? So the number one lethal threat facing the United States of America by our own United States governmental agencies. Well, what do you think the number one lethal threat to the United States is?
Global warming is probably what they said.
Well, I wish it was global warming. It's a little bit more nefarious than that. And so, but I would think the number one threat facing the United States of America, lethal threat, because there's the word lethal, would be the fact that we have open borders and we have known terrorists on our own terrorist watch list, ISA, Al-Qaeda, Iranians, Yemenis, all of these people flooding our borders, right, that we've caught. That should be the number one lethal threat facing America. No, the number one lethal threat facing America is transnational, racial, and ethnic violence, motivated violence.
Golly.
Yeah,
and
push that agenda.
And I want to tell you why this is so important. So in 2022, the Secretary General of the United Nations, they do a yearly report on counterterrorism and human rights. And that's what I spoke on. And so last year's agenda, which got passed into law, and there's a lot of laws and a lot of language involved in this. I'm not going to get into that today, but look up XRIRB, XRIRB. And so it has to do with xenophobia, racism, intolerance, religion, and belief. And why is that important? Because what they're trying to do now is, in all of this 2-hour plus meeting, they are saying that if disinformation, so if you are putting out disinformation that they deem as disinformation, you would be considered a threat. MAGA, conservatives, parents who stand up against the LGBTQ, CRT, all of these things are going to fall into what they deem as a threat to national security. And this is going to be going to, there's a whole lot more I can unpack. And then I started looking at a whole lot of other things and connecting the dots. I'm going to talk about a couple try to hit some things hard here in the last few minutes that we have. I'm going to go into depth about this on Saturday on my Storm series, but I want your listeners to understand that there is a purposeful agenda. This agenda will pass in June at Davos. I've been invited to go to Costa Rica, to where a lot of these players and a lot of our own high ups in our own government are actually going to be discussing these very issues. And I promise you, if I can, I will be there to report from the inside of what their next steps are. So
Christie, Christie, though, one thing. So when, I can't get past this one thing. So when you talk about Ducey and, you don't get the funding, but you go in, and what do you think the purpose was for that? Because I think there's a parallel here with that and these other events that you're talking about. And I'm wondering if it's almost like they try to act like they're interested in helping just to find out. It's kind of like sleeping with the enemy. We're going to find out she's our enemy. And so we're going to bring her in and have her talk to us and tell us what all she'd love, because this is what she wants to do. And this is what she can do if she had the money. And then we know what our enemy is doing. Is that what's going on here?
Well, I'm a little smarter than them, so I understand the game, and I'm not going to play their game. I know how to outsmart them. My team is, like I said, the background that I come from, and my previous life, it's not going to work for me, and also they can't buy me. So I love my nation, I love my country, and I'm willing to take a bullet for it. My family fled Stalin. I'm a Russian Jew on my mother's side. We're in Ellis Island. My family got marched off to the gulags, and unfortunately some of them perished the gas chambers and stuff. So I have real skin in this game to try to fight to my last breath to save this country and sound the alarm.
Do you think that that's what they're doing, though, Christie? I mean, have
Very
they,
well possible.
yeah, and have they offered to pay you off?
No. That would probably not happen. I think it's more trying to figure out what our next moves are, what we're doing, what we're working on, what we know, what we don't know, and then being able to, possibly follow, where I was going, but again, I have an incredible Kennedy International Security and Services. If anybody out there needs a security company, Kennedy International Security and Logistics and Services is literally next level. International, can't get into this guy's background. It's incredible. But I'm very blessed to have this company and their security team working with me because, they keep me very safe. I have to travel with full-time security now because I have massive threats on my life.
So Christie, Sweet P9 says, why isn't our military putting a stop? We need them to step up now. What's going on?
Well, let me tell you really in a nutshell, because the Biden administration, actually, it started back in Obama's era. They started gutting our military and force retiring the good guys. And then Biden, fast forward to the unconstitutional mandate. That mandate was to identify the strong, right? The strong-minded, I don't mean physically, but the strong-minded military men and women who are going to stand up against an unconstitutional order. And so they systematically kicked them out of the military. So that's what's happened. We don't have a military. And I get asked this all the time. Is there some private military, secret military that's going to rush in and save us? And I'm here to tell everybody, 100%, that is not going to happen. We have good men and women who served in the military, who currently are serving in the military, who do I believe will stand up at the ready? Absolutely, when need be. But there is no secret military that right now is systematically working in this big scheme of things. We have fractured units who are fighting back, gathering intel and thwarting stuff. Yes, that is true. But as long as we have weak individuals in Congress and in the Senate, and ultimately in the deep state and in our White House, and they don't have a backbone to stop this, we are not going to have any military that's going to step up.
Okay. You were talking about everything going on with the trafficking at the border. R. Gracie says, is this going on in Ukraine? And is that part of what the Russian invasion is about?
Yes, it's going on in Ukraine. Massive amounts of human trafficking and child trafficking in Ukraine. No, that's not what this war is about. This war is a war that is about money laundering. This war is about taking down the United States of America, giving our secrets and our weapons to the enemy, just like what Biden did in Afghanistan. Anybody who used to be in the military or worked in the military realm understand that every protocol possible was not followed. And same thing with Ukraine. It's probably the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest money laundering schemes of the United States government to take our taxpayer dollars and fund our enemies. And if people think that Zelensky is this great guy, he is not. And I don't buy into all this conspiracy theory stuff, but if you go back and you look at how Zelensky came to power, who put him in power, and the why, there's massive cover-up going on inside Ukraine. The Democratic Party, the Communist Party, the World Economic Forum, and all of these individuals who want a globalist agenda. There was a lot of data and information that was kept in Ukraine, as well as 36 plus labs and other information that needed to be covered up and hidden. That is my personal professional assessment.
Okay, Christie, we've got about 3 minutes left. We're not going to get to the UN stuff. I've got a couple of questions here that I want to make sure we get the answers to, as we've gotten so many questions for you. You're just such a great guest. We got a question from Happy. He says, I heard that there is frequencies and vibrations that are built into the wall. He's talking about the Trump wall. Would like to know more about that. Anyone else hear that? I've heard about that, but can you add anything to that?
100%. So Trump's wall had a lot of sophisticated information and technology built into not the actual physical wall, but on the other side of the wall and underneath the ground, and towers and things like that. There was a lot of heavy, sophisticated technology to be able to thwart off a lot of invasion or individuals coming into this country. Under the Biden administration, he has completely dismantled, I would say probably at this point, over 60 to 70% of all of that equipment. And what didn't get finished is laying on the side of the ground, rotting or being buried, by the way, with your taxpayer funded dollars.
Okay. Dominion Jack says, Christie, do you believe that any of this would have happened if Donald Trump was still president? Or do you think that this has just been going on and continue to happen all along for decades?
Well, it's been going on for decades. This has been a plan for 50 plus years. Not going to get into the history of that. Do I think this would have happened under Trump's watch? I don't think so. Trump, I think, believed, and again, this isn't political. This is about policies and agenda. So that's what we have to get rid of, this party system. It's about, are you a constitutionalist? Do you believe in the foundation of our nation? And are you going to uphold the laws of the land? And that is to protect and defend a sovereign nation, right? Without borders, you have no sovereign nation. So Trump, everyone doesn't understand. Trump used to be a Democrat. And so I believe in him. Plus, he was an elitist. He was a billionaire. So he was in their club. I not firsthand, but this is my assessment and take. I believe that probably Trump understood what was getting ready to happen. And that's why he threw his hat in the name to run for president, because at the end of the day, I think he decided, you know what, I love my country and I have children and grandchildren, right? And we're going to grow up in a socialist communist nation. And I want to stop that. So he was the great disruptor. And I think that his policies were working. Whether you liked him or how he talked or whatever, who cares? I care about policies and his agenda. And it was America first. It was protect America. And yes, I believe that he would have helped protect us even further.
All right, Christie. So March the 25th, you and Sheriff Mark Lamb have a big event preparing for the storm. What does everybody need to know about this? We do have the link in the description for people to be able to click on. I know you want them to register. What else does everyone need to know?
This is going to be an incredible hour and a half. You must be registered. It's free, but you must be registered to attend this. I want you to share this with every single person you know and on all your social media platforms. We are definitely going to try to be shadow banned. Tom Homan, who used to be the ICE director, I think he's going to try to also come in via phone. You're going to be able to actually ask questions at the end of this. The last 30 minutes of this show, you're going to be able to interact and ask questions and get your questions answered. What's unique about this is we're not just going to tell you what the problem is and what's really going on, but we're going to give you the solutions you need to geofence your family and your communities. And if you don't know what geofencing, sorry, that's a military term. It's a protection. It's a gate around your home, your family, and what you need to do to prepare for exactly what's getting ready to happen to the United States.
Well, I think Christie just answered Lord Help Us Now. The Lord Help Us Now username said, what else can we do to help? And I think that's one of the things. I think that you've got to be attending these kinds of events. You can do them from the safety and comfort of your own home to get yourself educated, just like with these shows. Christie, an hour just isn't enough with you, girl. We're going to have you back. You're amazing. You're amazing. So I'll be in touch. And Warren, thank you so much for not only the introduction and helping everything, but also helping me to co-host today's show. I appreciate you. You're just amazing. All right. We'll see you right here next time on the Michelle Moore Show.
Do you have a book